don't always have to go and correct every theological flaw that we run across, okay? Get to what is the real thing that they're really needing, and address that, okay? After he did that, I'm sure the guy didn't have any questions about the theology of Jesus at that point. Okay. But that was an interesting place, and you can still, my photo doesn't show it well, but you can still see where some of the colonnades were in, as is described in the Gospels.
Have you been to Israel?
Yeah, I took that photo.
Oh, you did.
Yeah. Okay, Scott, let's go to the next one. All right. This is the plaque in the entryway to what is in Jerusalem now as the upper room. Now, you can read it. It says, a hall built in the Middle Ages, okay, at the place where, according to Christian tradition, Jesus partook of the Passover Eve meal with his disciples just before the crucifixion. So this is not the room. Go on to the next one. That's what's there now. That is, but
That's what?
that's not the room of the Last Supper, but it was built to take the place of that, okay?
On the site.
On the site. Now, interestingly enough, at the very first floor of that is a plaque that supposedly that's where the tomb of David is. Well, okay, this is far from the city of David portion of Jerusalem, which is now it's a bunch of slums. You just don't. I asked our guide where it was, and he kind of could point. It's way over there, that area. So, but you just don't go there. It's dangerous. But David would have been buried there because that was all of Jerusalem at the time he lived. So anyway, all right. Now we're going to go to the next one. This is in the Garden of Gethsemane. That olive tree and all the ones you're going to see here were there when Jesus was there. So, we don't know where exactly in the garden Jesus prayed, but
Is that one tree?
that's one tree.
That's one tree.
One olive tree. That's a 2,000-plus-year-old garden olive tree.
And Gethsemane means
I don't know.
oil press.
Oil press.
Oh.
Go to the next one. Another olive tree.
Yeah, those look like olive leaves.
Yeah, they're olive trees. There were some olives on the ground. And the next one shows a better picture of the garden.
I could just see Jesus kneeling right there.
Yeah, I mean seriously, could be.
It's so rocky and barren.
Yeah, well, keep in mind Israel is desert. Unless you carry water to something, it's not going to grow there. I was surprised. I grew up in Texas, and prickly pear, cactus are always everywhere. And I was surprised that they're everywhere in Israel, too.
So is that all sand there?
Dirt,
Oh, it's dirt.
dirt, kind of white, well, that color dirt, but dirt. This is right at the base of the Mount of Olives on the northern end. And there's a church there that was built, I think, probably during the Middle Ages. It's quite a neat little, I won't call it a cathedral, it's just a church. Incredible acoustics in there. When we got there was a group in their touring group. They were singing when they got done, and we sang. Just it was, the acoustics were just incredible in that place. Okay, now we're going to talk about the trial before Annas. And you can go to the next. This was where the arrest took place, was in the garden. This wall on that side is part of Caiaphas' house.
Part of what?
Caiaphas' house, the high priest. This pathway was there at Jesus, when Jesus was there. So, in all likelihood, he came across that pathway. Maybe under duress, but he came across it nonetheless. If I can get someone to look up John 18 and 12 through 14. And then Sam can tell us what the score is.
Say what?
What? I said you could tell us what the score is then.
It's 12 to. What verses did you want read? I can do that too.
18, 12 through 14. Hey, there's your.
Are you ready
there's
for
your
it to be
claim.
read?
Yeah.
Then the band of soldiers with its commanders and the officers of the Jews arrested Jesus and bound him. They brought him first to Annas, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. And Caiaphas was the one who had advised the Jews that it would be better if one man died for the people.
And if someone could read same chapter, 19 through 23.
Should we ask our late visitors to pay the honorary fee of being late? And that I mean, we always do it for everybody else. Is that appropriate?
I didn't do it for you.
We have to go to the
Well, I'm
back
an
of the
exception,
room.
though.
No, you have to go to the office and get a tardy slip.
And you ladies didn't think you'd be welcome.
Boy, were we wrong.
Sorry to interrupt, Randy.
Yeah.
Did you just get started late, or the traffic was heavy, or?
Remember, you're telling this to all of Kansas City.
Hello, again.
Embarrassing him before a whole 2 million people.
How about 19 through 23?
These girls have been to Israel too.
Yeah, I knew that.
Man, I was accused of watching the Super Bowl, and I guess I'm the only one that has my Bible.
What do you want read?
Chapter 18 of John, verses 19 through 23.
Okay. The high priest then questioned Jesus about his disciples and about his teaching. Jesus answered him, I have spoken openly to the world. I always taught in synagogues and in the temple, where all the Jews come together. And I spoke nothing in secret. Why do you question me? Question those who have heard what I spoke to them. They know what I said. When he had said this, one of the officers standing nearby struck Jesus, saying, Is that the way you should answer the high priest? Jesus answered him, If I have spoken wrongly, testify of the wrong. But if rightly, why do you strike me?
It's interesting that you can see the real power structure of the Sadducees in that they don't take him directly to who's the serving high priest at the time. They take him to the godfather of the high priest, which is Annas, the father-in-law. Okay, and then he appears before Caiaphas. Matthew 26, verse 57. I'll read that one. Those who had seized Jesus led him away to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were gathered together. Scott, going to the next one. This is the basement of Caiaphas's house. This is where they took Jesus.
This is where what?
This is the basement of Caiaphas's house, where they took Jesus for this part we're reading about now. Let's same chapter 26, 59 through 68. Now, if that looks small and kind of dark and foreboding, it is.
Is that a water heater over on the left?
No, that's just a light.
You've been to this place?
Yes.
All these places?
Those are my photos.
Oh, okay.
But all this has taken place that the scriptures of the prophets may be fulfilled. Then all the disciples left him and fled.
Now, let's Matthew 26, 59 through 68.
59?
Yeah.
Oh, I started too early.
Yeah.
Now the chief priests and the whole council kept trying to obtain false testimony against Jesus in order that they might put him to death. And they did not find any, even though many false witnesses came forward. But later on, two came forward and said, "This man stated, 'I am able to destroy the temple of God and to rebuild it in 3 days.' And the high priest stood up and said to him, 'Do you make no answer? What is it that these men are testifying against you?' But Jesus kept silent. And the high priest said to him, 'I adjure you by the living God that you tell us whether you are the Christ, the Son of God.' Jesus said to him, 'You have said it yourself. Nevertheless, I tell you, hereafter you shall see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven.' Then the high priest tore his robe, saying, 'He has blasphemed. What further need do we have of witnesses? Behold, you have now heard the blasphemy. What do you think?' They answered and said, 'He is deserving of death.' Then they spat in his face and beat him with their fists, and others slapped him and said, 'Prophesy to us, you Christ. Who is the one who hit you?'
I have heard people say that Jesus never claimed to be God, but this section here is refutes that, because the high priest Caiaphas certainly understood that's what he said. Now, the high priest did something that he was not supposed to do either, ever. And he tore his robe. The high priest was never supposed to tear his robe. That's back from Exodus, when they made it.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
The high priest was never supposed to tear his robe.
Never spoke.
Tear his robe.
Oh,
Never tore his robe.
okay.
Okay. Let's look at the next photo. More of the same place, just to kind of get the scale of it. Again, rather small. The guy over there was part of my tour group. So
Would this have been decorated, furnished to make a lot more attractive? Or?
no, I doubt it. This is probably a place that the good people never really went to if they could help it. The whole point of it, you have to go down some pretty winding stairs to get to here. It is not easily accessible. It was a out-of-the-way place that they went to hold this trial. They didn't want it to see the light of day. And when you look at this, you also, in there, you understand it could not have held the whole Sanhedrin in that room. So it had to be just a small group. Now, we'll get to the point where he takes it to they take him to the Sanhedrin. But by then, they had already passed judgment and determined what they wanted to do, as has already been stated. But before we get there, we're going to talk about the denial of Peter. We go to the next one, Scott. As you can see in the garden, this is not the court courtyard, where the denial took place. It's interesting, the little guide markers as you're walking along to find the place are roosters. They're cut out roosters that are guide marks. Someone could read Mark 14, 54.
Where?
Mark 14, what?
54.
$54 to what?
Just read 54 and then we'll go to the next.
Just plain old
Yeah.
54. Peter had followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest, and he was sitting with the officers and warming himself at the fire.
Okay, now 66 through 72. Same chapter. You can read that.
As Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came. And seeing Peter warming himself, she looked at him and said, "You also were with Jesus, the Nazarene." But he denied it, saying, "I neither know nor understand what you are talking about." And he went out onto the porch. The servant girl saw him and began once again to say to the bystanders, "This is one of them." But again he denied it, and after a little while the bystanders were again saying to Peter, "Surely you are one of them, for you are a Galilean too." But he began to curse and swear, "I do not know this man you are talking about." Immediately a rooster crowed a second time, and Peter remembered how Jesus had made the remark to him, Before a rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times." And he began to weep.
As we go through all of these trials, 3 is seems to be a relevant number because we've had 3 denials. When we get to Pilate, Pilate is going to find Jesus innocent 3 times and want to turn him loose, and the Jews revolt. So it's the innocence or guilt is determined based on the testimony of 2. And Pilate had 3 different times he tried him, and 3 different times, even after beating him almost to death, he still determined he was not guilty of anything. So now we get to the trial before the Sanhedrin. Luke 22, verses 66 through 71.
66 to 71.
As soon as it was day, the elders of the people, both chief priests and scribes, came together and led him into their council, saying, "If you are the Christ, tell us." But he said to them, "If I tell you, you will by no means believe." To 69?
Yeah.
Okay. And if I also ask you, you will by no means answer me or let me go. Hereafter the Son of Man will sit on the right hand of the power of God.
71.
Oh, 71. Then they all said, Are you then the Son of God? So he said to them, You rightly say that I am. And they said, What further testimony do we need? For we have heard it ourselves from his own mouth.
I like what the NASB says. He says, yes, I am.
Yeah.
Next point is the death of Judas. This is in Matthew 27, 3 through 10.
Then when Judas, who had betrayed him, saw that he had been condemned, he felt remorse and returned the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. But they said, What is that to us? See to that yourself. How far?
10.
And he threw the pieces of silver into the sanctuary and departed. And he went away and hanged himself. And the chief priests took the pieces of silver and said, It is not lawful to put them into the temple treasury, since it is the price of blood. And they counseled together, and with the money bought the potter's field as a burial place for strangers. For this reason, that field has been called the field of blood to this day. Then that which was spoken through Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled, saying, And they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of the one whose price had been set by the sons of Israel, and they gave them for the potter's field, as the Lord directed me.
Interesting, they took the money out of the treasury to give to Judas, and then it wasn't considered blood money, but now it is. That's the contradictions in of the rulers was really kind of says what we see today is not new.
I'm not hearing very well tonight.
Huh? What?
Yeah. If I've got this blank look on my face, that's why.
He said you owed him $20.
Is it?
What?
That brings us through Thursday. Now we're into Friday. Okay. Then we're the trial before Pilate, or Pilate, as he would. He was an early practitioner of that form of exercise, Pilates. Mark 15, 1 through 5.
And early in the morning, the chief priests with the elders and the scribes and the whole council immediately held a consultation, and binding Jesus, they led him away and delivered him to Pilate. Pilate questioned him, Are you the king of the Jews? And he answered them, It is as you say. The chief priests began to accuse him harshly. Then Pilate questioned him again, saying, Do you not answer? See how many charges they bring against you? But Jesus made no further answer, so Pilate was amazed.
Okay. And then Pilate sees a possible, here's a guy, he doesn't want to touch this situation at all. He just wants it to just go away, okay? Because he knows anything he does is going to stir up the population, and he's going to have a mess on his hands, and that's the last thing he wants, is to have a mess on his hands. Now,
the history of the time, I don't know whether it's Josephus or not, but writes about some of Pilate's challenges with the Jewish people. And I think in one incident he had the Roman banners flying from part of the what would have been the palace or something near the temple courts of Rome, which got,
Yeah.
the Pharisee,
Yeah, he was on a kind of a short leash with Rome right at that
and
point.
they were sending envoys letters all the time
Oh,
back
yeah.
to him saying, you know what Pilate is doing? And he was aware of those things. And so he was walking a tightrope.
Yeah.
If you would like to read a good historical novel relative to Pontius Pilate, Paul Meyer, not the Dallas guy, but he's a professor of New Testament studies at Eastern Michigan University or someplace like that. He's written an excellent historical novel on Pontius Pilate that it integrates a lot of the history, and he's an ancient historian
Yeah.
Well,
par excellence.
Was it Pilate's wife who said, "Do not have anything
Yeah.
to do with this man"?
Yeah.
She had a dream.
Yeah. So someone can read Luke 23 and start with 6 and 7.
When Pilate heard it, he asked whether the man was a Galilean. And when he learned that that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who himself also was in Jerusalem at the time.
Boy, Pilate's going, hey, this is great. Here you go. It's Herod's problem, not mine. So he sends him to Herod. We did at Lenexa Baptist, we did a Easter drama, okay? And when it got to the guy portraying Herod, by day he was a Kansas Highway Patrolman, and but it was great. Someone could read 8 through 12, that same chapter. 23, Luke 23.
Now when Herod saw Jesus, he was exceedingly glad, for he had desired for a long time to see him, because he had heard many things about him, and he hoped to see some miracle done by him. Then he questioned him with many words, but he answered him nothing. And the chief priests and scribes stood and vehemently accused him. Then Herod, with his men of war, treated him with contempt and mocked him, arrayed him in a gorgeous robe, and sent him back to Pilate. That very day, Pilate and Herod became friends with each other, for previously they had been at enmity with each other.
I'm not sure at that moment how happy Pilate was about that. Here he comes back.
Evidently pretty happy, because verse 12 says they became friends.
They became friends, yeah. Yeah, well, I think it was because they both disliked the Jews. Even though Herod was the king or tetrarch of the Jews. Now we get to the return to Pilate. John 18:39. Well, it starts, this is a long section. So we're going to start 18:39 through 40, and then we'll pick up at 19.
But you have a custom that I should release someone for you at the Passover. Who do you wish then that I release for you, the King of the Jews? Therefore they cried out again, saying, Not this man, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a robber.
He was destined for a cross. Barabbas was, because he was in there for insurrection and for murder. So there's without a doubt he was headed for to be crucified. John 19, and let's do 1 through 7.
So then Pilate took Jesus and scourged him, and the soldiers twisted a crown of thorns and put it on his head. And they put on him a purple robe. Then they said, Hail, King of the Jews! And they struck him with their hands. Pilate then went out again and said to them, Behold, I am bringing him out to you, that you may know that I find no fault in him. Then Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. And Pilate said to them, Behold the man. Therefore, when the chief priests and officers saw him, they cried out, saying, Crucify him, crucify him. Pilate said to them, You take him and crucify him, for I find no fault in him. The Jews answered him, We have a law, and according to our law, he ought to die, because he made himself the Son of God.
Okay, let's pick up at verse 8 through 12.
Therefore, when Pilate heard this statement, he was even more afraid. And he entered into the praetorium again, and he said to Jesus, Where are you from? But Jesus gave him no answer. So Pilate said to him, You do not speak to me. Do you not know that I have authority to release you, and I have authority to crucify you? Jesus answered, You have no authority over me, unless it has been given you from above. For this reason, he who delivered me to you has the greater sin. As a result of this, Pilate made efforts to release him, but the Jews cried out, saying, If you release this man, you are no friend of Caesar's. Everyone who makes himself out to be a king opposes Caesar.
Well, that got his attention, didn't it? Okay. Pick up at 13 through 15. Actually, 13 through 16.
And therefore, when Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judgment seat at a place called the Pavement, but in Hebrew, Gabbatha. Now it was the day of preparation for the Passover. It was about the 6th hour, and he said to the Jews, Behold your king. So they cried out, Away with him, crucify him. And Pilate said to them, Shall I crucify your king? The chief priests answered, We have no king but Caesar. So he then handed him over to them to be crucified. Is that all right?
Yep. Next we get to the mockery by the soldiers. Matthew 27, 27 through 30.
Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole Roman cohort around him. And they stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. And after weaving a crown of thorns, they put it on his head and a reed in his right hand. And they kneeled down before him and mocked him, saying, Hail, King of the Jews! And they spat on him and took the reed and began to beat him on the head.
Keep in mind, on his head is this crown of thorns. And these, we're talking big, ugly thorns. You know, the soldiers, Roman soldiers in Jerusalem at that time were from Samaria. So they had ingrained dislike for Jews anyway. So this was, they were just like, great, we got him. We got somebody we can really pick on now. How many of you have ever saw the Mel Gibson movie, The Passion of the Christ? Well, there's some, that movie obviously takes everything from a Catholic point of view. There's some things about it that I think are very pertinent, and one of them is, as tough as it was to watch, the depiction of the scourging of Jesus. I mean, it showed how, and keep in mind it's Hollywood, but you can just really start to imagine. It wasn't that somebody just stood back and kind of tap, tap, tap. No, they literally almost beat him to death and tore him to shreds. So that's happened before this part here of the mocking. So he's already been, his whole backside of his body and his sides have been lacerated and ripped. And so, yeah. The next we get to the way to Calvary. This will be Mark 15, 20 through 23.
After they had mocked him, they took the purple robe off him and put his own garments on him and led him out to crucify him. They pressed into service a passerby coming from the country, Simon of Cyrene, the father of Alexander and Rufus, to bear his cross. And they brought him to the place Golgotha, which is translated place of the skull. They tried to give him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it.
None of the four Gospels talk about the crucifixion taking place on a hill, contrary to the old rugged cross. Okay, it was a place called the place of the skull. Scott, we can go to the next slide. This behind is what a British archaeologist, soldier archaeologist, in studying, going back, studying, early texts and things, determined that this was where the crucifixion probably took place, was in front of that. And the reason for it was outside the walls, which would make sense. It's also right by the main road from Jerusalem to Damascus. So as you read in the Gospels about people walking by and jeering at them. That's why the Romans did that, so to make an impression. They hung the crucified where the most people are likely to see them. Okay, go to the next one, Scott. It's a little bit better picture. You can kind of start to
Is
see
that there behind the wall?
this wall there, that rock is Golgotha. So the place where the cross would be is now a bus depot down below it. You can kind of see a bus there. Scott, the next one. This next one was taken, that photo was taken over 100 years ago. You can see the eye sockets, and that's before erosion has had as much of effect as it had. But that's closer, that's even 1900 years after the fact. So, but that's.
So you're saying he's crucified below?
Right down.
Not
right,
on top.
No, down at the ground level there. You can see the road there, the camels going along the road. And when you go there, they have quite a presentation that they go through in describing all the reasons. Very impressive. So called Gordon's Golgotha. Yeah, if you want to look it up, it's. When we were there, our group, there's also a nice garden area that they've built up around it, and it's also where there is a garden tomb. Now, I don't know, it would make sense based on the description that the tomb was close to where the crucifixion took place, but I don't know if that's really the tomb. We can go to the next one. That's the tomb that I went in and it was empty. It was pouring down rain at that time. But we had our group, we did communion in that garden. It was just really neat. And we each got a little olive wood communion cup, and I still got mine, but anyway, it was just a neat experience. The next point in the life of Christ is the crucifixion. And we'll go to Luke 23:33 through 38 to start with.
And when they came to the place called the Skull, there they crucified him and the criminals, one on the right and the other on the left. But Jesus was saying, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. And they cast lots, dividing up his garments among themselves. And the people stood by looking on, and even the rulers were sneering at him, saying, He saved others, let him save himself if this is the Christ of God, his chosen one. And the soldiers also mocked him, coming up to him, offering him sour wine, and saying, If you are the King of the Jews, save yourself. Now there was also an inscription above him, This is the King of the Jews.
Pick up at 39 through 43.
Then one of the criminals who were hanged, blaspheming him, saying, If you are the Christ, save yourself and us. But the other answering rebuked him, saying, Do you not even fear God, seeing you are under the same condemnation? And we indeed justify justly, for we receive the due reward of our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong. Then he said to Jesus, Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Through 43?
Yeah.
Okay. And Jesus said to him, Assuredly I say to you today, you will be with me in paradise.
Gee, he didn't get baptized? He didn't get baptized? No,
Didn't go to church
no,
every week.
didn't go to church, no convocation. Huh? 44 through 49.
It was now about the 6th hour, and darkness fell over the whole land until the 9th hour, because the sun was obscured, and the veil of the temple was torn in two. And Jesus, crying out with a loud voice, said, Excuse me, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. Having said this, he breathed his last. Now when the centurion saw what had happened, he began praising God and saying, Certainly this man was innocent. And all the crowds who came together for this spectacle, when they observed what had happened, began to return, beating their breasts. And all his acquaintances and the women who accompanied him from Galilee were standing at a distance, seeing these things.
what is the significance of beating on your breast?
Well, that our
What's the significance of beating on your breast? Was that a common thing to do?
I'm not sure.
Speak up, Karen, what do you ask?
Oh, what is the significance of beating on their breasts? Was that a common thing? I don't remember reading about that too much in other places.
Well,
One time I heard it explained that was a sign of remorse, that they realized that they had treated him wrongly.
that would make sense.
Haven't you ever just knocked yourself in the head for something? You just pound yourself for,
Every day.
yeah. It just shows the level of distress.
Next, we get to the burial. This is John 19, 31 through 37.
All right, Sam.
John 19, 31 through 37.
Oh, okay. Change screens. No,
Yeah.
No.
just kidding. Then the Jews, because it was the day of preparation, so that the bodies would not remain on the cross on the Sabbath, for the Sabbath was a high day, asked Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away. So the soldiers came and broke the legs of the first man and of the other who was crucified with him. But coming to Jesus, when they saw that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. But one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and immediately blood and water came out. And he who has seen has testified, and his testimony is true, and he knows that he's telling the truth, so that you also may believe. For these things came to pass to fulfill the scripture, not a bone of him shall be broken. And again, another scripture says, they shall look on him whom they have pierced.
As far as it's recorded, the only one of the 11 who witnessed the crucifixion was John, who's writing this. And rarely does he make a point of him being the eyewitness, but here he is.
Well, the others were far off.
Yeah, well, that or they
Well, I
run,
mean,
they've got their
I think
heads
they
in
may have
the.
been from within sight.
Yeah,
But
he was
because
close.
that would have been part of the things that would have been an important aspect
Yeah.
of the gospel for
Yeah.
the disciples to see
Yeah.
and give testimony
Yeah.
to,
Yeah,
and would provide more than the one witness. Who,
John was close enough for Jesus to
To hear
address
him
him and his mother.
yeah.
So, in 38 through 42.
After these things, Joseph of Arimathea, being a disciple of Jesus, but a secret one for fear of the Jews, asked Pilate that he might take away the body of Jesus. And Pilate granted permission. So he came and took away his body. Nicodemus, who had first come to him by night, also came bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloe, about 100 pounds weight. How far do you want to
Keep going. 42.
So they took the body of Jesus and bound it in linen wrappings with the spices, as is the burial custom of the Jews. Now, in the place where he was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden, a new tomb in which no one had yet been laid. Therefore, because of the Jewish day of preparation, since the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there.
There's next to, close to the, where he was crucified. Here, you think about, Jesus was not large or small, but he was a fairly solid guy. I mean, he's been living outdoors for at least the last 3 years and, working as a laborer before that.
Walking everywhere.
Yeah, walking everywhere.
Uphill, downhill.
Yeah. And there's a lot of hills there, okay? And not only that, so here's Joseph and Nicodemus. They're, carrying Jesus' body, which, by the way, made them unclean. So they could not take part in the rest of the Passover meals that day until they went through and got them the whole day cycle to be cleaned. But also 100 pounds of spices. Okay? Anybody ever picked up a 100-pound sack of cement?
No.
I have, and it's like crushing. Okay? So, the fact that they found a tomb that wasn't far from where they took him off the cross would make sense. And the next point we get is the women at the tomb. This is on Saturday. So we're through with Friday. Matthew 27, verse 61. Again, this is according to the outline.
And Mary Magdalene was there, and the other Mary, sitting opposite the grave.
Okay. And then we have talk about the guard, which is Matthew 27, 62 through 66.
On the next day, which followed the day of preparation, the chief priests and Pharisees gathered together to Pilate, saying, "Sir, we remember while he was still alive how that deceiver said, 'After 3 days I will rise.' Therefore command that the tomb be made secure until the 3rd day, lest his disciples come by night and steal him away, and say to the people, 'He has risen from the dead.' So the last deception will be worse than the first." Pilate said to them, "You have a guard. Go your way, make it as secure as you know how." So they went and made the tomb secure, sealing the stone and setting the guard.
All is dark, but Sunday's coming. So now we get to the resurrection. Mark 16, 1 through 8.
When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so they might come and anoint him. Very early on the first day of the week, they came to the tomb when the sun had risen, and they were saying to one another, "Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance of the tomb?" Looking up, they saw that the stone had been rolled away, although it was extremely large. Entering the tomb, they saw a young man sitting at the right, wearing a white robe, and they were amazed. And he said to them, "Do not be amazed. You're looking for Jesus the Nazarene, who has been crucified. He's not here. He is risen. Behold, here is the place where they laid him. But go tell his disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you." How far did you want to go? 8 through 8?
Yeah.
Then they went out and fled from the tomb, for trembling and astonishment had gripped them. And they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid.
Then we have the appearances of Jesus. First to Mary Magdalene, John 20, 11 through 18.
of time.
But Mary was standing outside the tomb weeping, and so as she wept, she stooped and looked into the tomb. And she beheld two angels in white sitting, one at the head and one at the feet, where the body of Jesus had been lying. And they said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "Because they have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." When she had said this, she turned around and beheld Jesus standing there, and did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Stop clinging to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brethren and say to them, I ascend to my Father and your Father, and my God and your God." And Mary Magdalene came, announcing to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord," and that he had said these things to her.
His appearance to other women, Matthew 28, 9 and 10.
And behold, Jesus met them and greeted them, and they came up and took hold of his feet and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and take word to my brethren to leave for Galilee, and there they will see me."
We are past time, so I'm going to stop it there, and we'll pick up next Sunday night.
Oh, yeah. No, another whole page.
Yeah, we're not done yet.
No.
So I've still got, I've got more pages than we did tonight. So that's as far as we get. Sam, would you close us out in prayer?
Our Heavenly Father, we wonder at the depth of the love that Jesus had, that the Father had, the Spirit had, that the Father would ask the Son, and the Son would submit, and the Spirit would give power to Jesus to endure what he did in his passion for us. We wonder about it, Father. We do thank you for it. We pray that we might live our lives in the light of the resurrected Christ, who paid with his earthly life, that we might have with him eternal life. These things we thank you for. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you all for joining us. See you next Sunday.